They thought they were just trimming a few branches, but what they really cut was my patience. I came home to find my trees hacked apart without a warning, without a knock on the door, without a single ounce of respect. The HOA said it was about protecting property value. What they didn't realize, they were about to learn what real value actually means. This isn't just a story about trees. It's about power. It's about standing up. And it's about what happens when one homeowner decides he's had enough. The first time they cut my trees, I tried to convince myself it was just a misunderstanding. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 48 years old, a public high school history teacher, and I've lived in Oak Ridge Estates for almost 12 years. My wife, Megan, and I bought this house when our daughter, Lily, was only 6. She's 17 now, practically grown. But when I look at the front yard, I still see that little girl chasing fireflies under the trees. The trees were the reason we chose this house. 3 tall maple trees line the front yard like quiet guards. In October, they turned deep shades of red and gold. The leaves would drift down slowly, covering the grass like a soft blanket. Megan used to joke that our yard looked like a postcard. In the backyard stood 2 old oaks, thick trunks, wide branches. They gave us shade during the brutal summer heat. Our patio sat right beneath them. That's where we had birthday parties. That's where Lily learned to ride her bike. That's where Megan and I would sit at night after dinner, talking about bills, work, and life. Those trees weren't landscaping. They were memory. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and stopped cold. The lower branches of my maples were gone, not trimmed neatly, not shaped professionally. They were hacked off, jagged cuts, splintered wood, limbs scattered across the lawn like something violent had happened overnight. I felt my stomach drop. For a moment, I honestly wondered if someone had vandalized our yard, but then I saw the tire tracks near the curb. Professional equipment. I walked the property line slowly, heart pounding. They hadn't just trimmed near the sidewalk. They had cut several feet inside my yard. No note on the door, no voicemail, no warning. I went inside and called the HOA office. "Oh, yes," the property manager said, like we were discussing the weather. We had the landscaping crew tidy up overgrowth near the sidewalks. It's part of neighborhood uniformity. Uniformity. I stared out the window at the uneven stumps where branches used to be. "They're on my property," I said carefully. "You can't just cut trees without asking." "It falls under maintenance guidelines," she replied. I asked her to show me where. She said she'd email it. She never did. That night, Megan could see I was upset. "Maybe it's just a one-time thing," she said gently. "Maybe they thought they were helping." I wanted to believe that, so I let it go, and that was my mistake. 2 months later, I came home from work to find my backyard oak stripped. The sun hit the patio differently. Too bright, too harsh. I walked around the house and felt like I was looking at someone who'd been injured. Huge limbs were gone. The canopy was uneven, lopsided. Branches that had taken decades to grow were just missing. Lily stood near the fence staring up at it. "Dad," she said quietly, "it looks wrong." It did. There's something unsettling about seeing something living damaged without explanation. Trees don't cry out. They don't defend themselves. They just stand there. I called the HOA again, this time angrier. "We address excessive overgrowth," the property manager said. "You never notified me." I said, "It's part of our visual standards enforcement." Visual standards. That phrase followed me all evening. That week, I attended the HOA board meeting. I don't usually go. Most meetings are about mailbox colors, fence height, parking complaints. But this time, I sat through the entire agenda until they called my name. Carol, the board president, sat at the center table. Perfect hair, perfect blazer, perfect smile that never quite reached your eyes. "You have 3 minutes," she said. I stood up. "You cut my trees without permission," I said. "Twice. You damaged mature oak limbs that cannot simply grow back overnight. You didn't send notice. You didn't ask." Carol folded her hands calmly. "Mr. Harper, the board has authority to maintain aesthetic consistency. Trees cannot obstruct sight lines or disrupt neighborhood symmetry." Symmetry. They're trees, I replied. They grow naturally. We're protecting property values, she said, firm now. That was the moment something changed in me. They weren't apologizing. They weren't reconsidering. They believed they were right. And the room was silent. Neighbors avoided eye contact. No one wanted conflict. I drove home feeling smaller than I had in years, but also something else. Determined. I teach American history. I tell my students all the time, always read the original document. So that weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with the HOA covenant binder. Every page, every clause, every footnote. 3 hours later, I found it. Section 8.4, Landscaping Authority. The HOA can enforce maintenance standards. Yes, but they were required to provide written notice, allow 30 days for homeowner correction, intervene only if the homeowner failed to comply. They had never sent notice. Not once. This wasn't about trimming trees. It was about overreach. Instead of losing my temper, I made calls. First, I hired a certified arborist. He walked the property slowly, inspecting cuts. He shook his head more than once. These weren't done properly, he said. Large limbs should be removed carefully to avoid stress. This increases disease risk. He wrote a detailed report stating the trimming reduced canopy health and could shorten the lifespan of both oaks. Then I hired a property appraiser. He evaluated the home's curb appeal, shade value, and long-term resale factors. Buyers pay for mature trees, he explained, especially in this climate. Shade lowers energy costs. It adds character. His estimate showed a measurable drop in projected value. The irony wasn't lost on me. The HOA claimed they were protecting property values. Their actions were lowering mine. I sent both reports to the board with a formal letter demanding immediate cessation of unauthorized trimming, compensation for damage, clarification of policy moving forward. They didn't respond, not even a courtesy email. That silence spoke louder than words. So I decided to stop fighting alone. Instead of filing a lawsuit, I knocked on doors. The first few neighbors were hesitant. I don't want trouble, one man said. I'm sure they know what they're doing. Another shrugged. But when I showed them Section 8.4, something shifted. They cut my hedges last spring, one woman admitted quietly. They fined me for planting native flowers, another said. Stories started coming out. It wasn't just my trees. It was small things, quiet things, people who paid fines instead of arguing, people who felt intimidated, people who assumed the board had unlimited authority. They didn't. They just counted on no one challenging them. Within 3 weeks, I gathered signatures from more than half the neighborhood requesting a special review of landscaping enforcement. The emergency HOA meeting was packed. Standing room only. Carol looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd known her. When I stood up, I didn't attack anyone. I didn't yell. I told the story. I talked about Lily growing up under those trees. I talked about summer shade. I talked about the arborist report. I held up the appraiser's valuation. You say you're protecting property value, I said steadily. But value isn't just clean lines and identical lawns. It's trust. It's fairness. It's respecting property rights. I paused. When you cut my trees without permission, you didn't just trim branches. You trimmed trust. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. Neighbors began speaking up. One by one. For the first time, the board wasn't in control of the room. The community was 0.2 months later. Everything changed. A vote was held to amend landscaping authority rules. New policies required. Mandatory written notice. Clear photographic documentation. Homeowner response period. Independent review before any forced trimming. The vote passed overwhelmingly. Carol resigned a few weeks after. I didn't celebrate her resignation. This was never about revenge. When I say I trimmed their property value, I don't mean I destroyed anything. I mean I exposed the truth. I trimmed away the illusion that authority can operate without accountability. I trimmed away the fear that keeps neighbors silent. I trimmed away the idea that one voice doesn't matter. This fall, the maples are growing back. Not perfectly. Some branches will always look uneven, but they're alive. The oaks are healing too. New growth reaching upward like quiet proof that damage isn't always permanent. Last week, a neighbor stopped me while I was raking leaves. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't think anyone could stand up to them." I smiled. I didn't stand up alone. I told him. That's the lesson. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it knocks on doors. Sometimes it reads fine print. Sometimes it gathers signatures. Sometimes it stands calmly in a crowded room and says, "Enough." The HOA wanted perfect symmetry. What we built instead was unity. And unity is stronger than any branch they could ever cut. In the end, we didn't just protect property values. We protected each other. And that's worth more than any perfectly trimmed tree. If you've ever felt ignored, bullied, or pushed around by an HOA, this story is proof that you're not powerless. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's neighbors standing together and saying, "No more." If this story meant something to you, make sure you thumbs up like this video. Speech balloon comment your own HOA experience below. Bell subscribe to HOA Tales, time for real stories about real homeowners standing their ground. Because here, we don't just tell HOA stories. We tell stories about accountability. And we're just getting started.